Somewhere beneath the sands of Egypt lie the bones of an empire that was shattered in a single night. A pharaoh, one of the most powerful men who ever lived, woke up that morning thinking he had already won. He had crushed the resistance, silenced the ringleader, reclaimed control. But by midnight, his army was at the bottom of the sea, his kingdom unraveling, and the man he thought he'd broken, leading 2 million people to freedom. This is not the version they taught you in Sunday school. Stay with me, because the deeper you go, the more disturbing this story gets. Before this is over, you'll be asking yourself 3 questions, and none of the answers are what you'd expect. Who was Moses, really? And why did the most powerful empire on earth spend decades trying to erase his name? How did one man take on Pharaoh and win? What actually happened at the Red Sea? And why do historians still argue about it today? Moses didn't just lead a rebellion. He dismantled a civilization, piece by piece, plague by plague. And when it was over, the Egypt that existed before him never came back. We're starting from the very beginning, because to understand what Moses did, you first have to understand what he was born into. Egypt, roughly 1300 BCE, the most dominant civilization on earth. And at the center of it all, the Pharaoh, not just a king, a god king. His word was law. His word was reality. But underneath all that gold and marble, something ugly was festering. Because Egypt's entire economy ran on the backs of a people who had been enslaved for over 400 years. The Hebrews were everywhere in Egypt, building monuments, hauling stone, dying in the heat so Pharaoh's legacy could live forever. And as their population grew, so did Pharaoh's fear. So he made a decision so monstrous, so cold-blooded, that historians still struggle to fully process it. He ordered the execution of every Hebrew baby boy at birth. Every single one. And into that world, Moses was born. His mother, Jochebed, did what any mother with nothing left to lose would do. She made a waterproof basket. She laid her infant son inside, and she pushed him into the current of the Nile and prayed. Think about that moment. The sound of the water, the weight of that choice, knowing the only way to save him was to let him go. That basket drifted right into the hands of Pharaoh's own daughter. She pulled him from the water. She named him Moses, meaning drawn from the water, and she raised him as a prince of Egypt. Moses grew up with everything: power, status, education, the finest that Egypt had to offer. He dressed like them, spoke like them, ate like them, but he knew, he always knew. One day, Moses saw an Egyptian taskmaster beating a Hebrew slave, his people. Something inside him snapped. He looked around, no weaknesses, and he acted. He killed the man and buried him in the sand. He thought no one saw. He was wrong. Within days, Pharaoh knew. Moses was now a fugitive, stripped of his title, his home, his identity, a man with no nation and no name, running into the wilderness with nothing. And it was in that wilderness where everything changed. Moses spent 40 years in the desert. 40 years. He married, had children, became a shepherd, a nobody, for the man who had once dined at Pharaoh's table. This was a complete and total death of identity, and yet something was coming, something he could never have prepared for. Imagine you're 80 years old, alone in the desert, and a bush in front of you catches fire, but doesn't burn. And then it speaks. God introduced himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Moses' enslaved people, and he gave Moses the most terrifying assignment in history. Go back to Egypt, confront Pharaoh, and bring my people out. Moses said no. At least he tried to. Who am I? They won't believe me. I can't speak well. One excuse after another. But God had an answer for every single one. And when it was over, Moses had no argument. Left. So the old shepherd turned around and walked back toward the most powerful empire on earth, with nothing but a wooden staff and a message. His brother Aaron became his voice. Together, they rallied the Hebrew people, a population that had been beaten down for 4 centuries. Getting them to believe wasn't just hard. It was almost impossible. But then Moses performed signs, and slowly, painfully slowly, people started to believe. And then came the moment everything had been building toward. Moses, the fugitive prince, walked back into the palace he'd been exiled from and stood before the most powerful man in the world. Pharaoh laughed. Then he punished the Hebrew slaves harder, made their quotas impossible, took away their supplies, crushed any flicker of hope. It was about to get a lot worse. For everyone, what followed was unlike anything Egypt had ever experienced. Not one disaster, not 2, 10, escalating, relentless, each one targeting a different Egyptian god, a theological dismantling of their entire belief system. The Nile, Egypt's lifeline, turned to blood, undrinkable, unusable, and that was just the beginning. Then came the frogs, swarming everywhere, into homes, into beds, into ovens. There was no escaping them. Then gnats, rising up from the dust itself. Even Pharaoh's own magicians looked at each other and said, "This is the finger of God." Then flies, but only in Egyptian homes. Every Hebrew household, untouched, the division was impossible to ignore. Then disease struck the livestock. Egypt's animals dying by the thousands. Hebrew livestock completely fine. Then boils, painful, disfiguring boils, breaking out on the skin of every Egyptian. Then hail, a storm so violent it destroyed the crops. The kind of storm Egypt had never seen in living memory. Then the locusts came, and what little the hail had left standing, the locusts finished. And then came the darkness. 3 days, total impenetrable blackness. Pharaoh couldn't see his own hand in front of his face. 9 plagues, 9 chances for Pharaoh to let them go. 9 times he said no. The 10th plague was different. There would be no negotiating after this one. God told Moses what was coming, and he gave the Hebrews a way out. They were to sacrifice a lamb, mark their door frames with its blood, stay inside, and wait. That night, the angel of death moved through Egypt. Every firstborn son in Egypt, from the lowest servant to Pharaoh's own heir, died in a single night. And in that moment of devastation, Pharaoh did something he had never done before. He surrendered. Go, take your people, leave. What happened next has never been seen before or since. Roughly 2 million men, women, children, and livestock moving together out of Egypt into the unknown, the largest mass exodus in ancient history. They had been slaves that morning. By nightfall, they were free. But freedom, in this story, doesn't come easily. 3 days after letting them go, Pharaoh had a change of heart. Maybe grief turned to rage. Maybe pride overrode pain. Whatever the reason, he mobilized the most powerful military force in the ancient world. 600 elite chariots, Egypt's finest soldiers, racing across the desert to drag 2 million people back in chains. Moses' people panicked. They screamed at him. Were there no graves in Egypt? Did you bring us out here to die in the desert? What happened next has been debated by scholars, scientists, and historians for 3,000 years. The waters parted. A path appeared, dry ground stretching to the other side. And 2 million people walked through on dry land. When Pharaoh's army followed, the waters returned. The sea swallowed every chariot, every soldier, every horse. The empire that had built itself on the broken backs of the Hebrews ended there. At the edge of the water, Moses stood on the other side of the sea, and for the first time in his 80 years, he was truly free. And here's what I keep coming back to. This man, abandoned as a baby, raised by his oppressors, exiled, broken, reluctant, became the instrument of the greatest liberation in ancient history. Not because he was the most powerful, not because he was fearless, because he was willing, even when every part of him said he wasn't enough. Now here's what I want you to sit with. Pharaoh had every advantage: the army, the wealth, the power, the palace, and Moses had a stick and a calling. Which plague do you think finally broke Pharaoh, and why? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if you thought this was intense, next week we're going inside the story of David and Goliath, but not the version you know. The real political power play happening behind the slingshot. That one is wild. Subscribe so you don't miss it. I'll see you there.